where every year our government spends billions of naira on relief materials, whereas Nigerians keep losing their crops, farmlands, properties worth billions of naira, and sometimes lose their lives. But why hasn't the federal government offered a solution that is going to put this bedeviling issue to rest once and for all? This is the topic we're going to be discussing on this edition of the Talking Point. My name is Natafina Suleiman. You are welcome.
And I am Billy Graham Evan. Welcome to Talking Point. Nigerians keep suffering and keep picking the pieces of their lives every year when it's rainy season and when flood comes. Farmlands, homes, and properties are being destroyed. Why can't we do something meaningful in order to address it instead of being committed to the business of relief material distribution? It has become like annual. We just distribute relief materials without equally setting infrastructures and institutions in order to provide a lasting solution to this flooding. This is a country that generates, that depends on hydroelectricity. Why can't we do something with these waters, bodies of waters that have been destroying and our properties? Why can't we channel them for creative use? On this very particular issue, we have an eminent scholar and professor of communication. He is also the special advisor to the Adamawa State Governor on communication and strategy, the person of Professor John. So you're welcome to this studio, sir.
Thank you, Talking Point.
You're welcome, sir. So we know that last year the House of Assembly they actually brought up a budget of about 200 billion to mitigate the issue of flood. Now that's an exorbitant amount of money, considering the fact that such amount of money or net it is being spent yearly to mitigate the issue of flood. Why hasn't the government given us a solution permanently so that we find rest from this recurring issue?
Well, I wish I were government myself. What I mean by being government is your big reference to the humongous amount of 200 billion naira. That sounds disturbing, but somehow not fitting exactly. Because 200 billion, if you look at it, is not big amount, at least to do what we're talking about. We're talking about a huge body of water or waters in courts, that flow uncontrollably from sources that are purely natural, that you really cannot do anything about. They become disasters by human activity. One, the settlement we find ourselves into, and thereby turning to be too difficult for us to contend. And if that is the issue, and becoming that difficult, it means we need to take a very difficult and a serious, action to ensure that we actually meet it up. So when you talk about 200 billion, just imagine what that can be to the losses that we've had across, from the corridor of the rivers to wherever this devastation is going on. So to my mind, it's good that they're taking steps to mitigate, but it's not enough because the actual flooding risk management control system or mechanism is not put in place, at least to make it more comprehensive enough to determine what is to be done, at least to solve the problem.
So, sir, with regards to this very particular issue, it's not just only about the fact that these issues, we know that government cannot do everything at the same time. So that's after these years of these things happening, even in small steps, government could have budgeted, could have injected some money towards building infrastructure. I think one of the recommendations that was made in the presentation at the National Assembly by the member of the House of Representatives, Representative Lamudre Debsa, and the Newman at the Federal House of Assembly was for the creation of buffer dams. It has been there. Someone made the recommendation several years ago. He had to resurrect it last year and make those very particular presentations that there is the need to create buffer dams, to dredging of the rivers of the communities that are at the banks of the river. So, what do you think about the suggestions, and why is it that after several years that those things have been made, that those recommendations have been made, up till now, there is no step towards creating those very particular institutions or infrastructure?
First of all, let us appreciate what a research is. Research is an ongoing thing that is continuous, that is spontaneous, that flows. When you look at civilized nations of the world, they do it ongoing without a break. I assure you, with all due respect, to the persons that are raising it presently, when you look deep into our own case in Nigeria, you will understand that when the feasibility was done, at least for two dams, to be created across River Niger and Benue, it's been 50 years and thereabout by now. And I don't think there have been any review, at least to make it up. And you also will personally understand that Labrador Dam, for instance, have been existing for over 40 years. And if that's the case, you now have a disconnection between what brought about the idea of the Labrador, and the subsequent impact, dealing with the outcome of what we are seeing presently. There is disconnection, between the past research and what is going on now. And let me tell you, bedeviling this problem of flooding risk management in Nigeria is the failure of concrete information that is expert-like to be used good enough at least to give us solutions to what we are looking for. Whether you like it or not, you will accept with me that it's only emergency narratives that flood the air. What I mean by that is the impact, for the moment that you see, the flooding houses and the farms and the damages. Nobody has actually taken time to redefine, the impact of what it used to be before and what is taking place presently. And for that reason, I think we have to accept the fact that it's getting more difficult for us to put in place the mechanisms that are sincerely required, at least for this particular thing to be done. So you don't blame anybody that is a victim. Neither do you blame, the inconsistent government, and democratic flaw, that happens, inconsistently. One person at a time coming in, not seeing that problem. He goes, another person comes in, that problem becomes worse in its own place. But now, what is lacking, sincerely, to me, what should be done? It's about doing a connecting route, between the past, of the purposes of establishing the dams and the fallouts that are coming along the line and the changing in the ecological features of the river due to human activity. Some of these things truly they are caused by human activity. Now let me just give you an example. If you go to the lower Benue, not the upper part of it now, you will accept with me that there is an increased farming activity on the plains that is taking toll and danger on the marshes and wetlands because people are draining them and expanding the water system, into irrigation farming. Yes, it's a boost, but nobody has gone there to control, to study, and to know the impact of the fact that the more you drain water from the river, the more space you allow, for siltation and sand to come in and overtake the normal plains. And that means that wait. And that means
essence of government.
Yes, the essence of government.
Because individuals cannot.
Yeah, let me learn. I'm trying to
generate.
Yeah, you see, I'm trying to let you appreciate the fact.
Yes.
There's a lot of human activity, which is faster than the government can come in. It's true. Look at it. Is it hunger now for people to farm and get money? Or is it just for us to say, let's stop it and do something much more comprehensive? People will have to eat before certain things happen. What I'm trying to tell you is what has brought about, the problem that we are having with flooding. Systematically, whether you like to take it or not, you have to accept it, that human activity is adding to it. The farming activity, like I'm trying to tell you, is adding to, the disruption of the actual waterways inflow, and it's moving at a faster level, than the interventions are coming. So for you, and the argument you're trying to erupt is, what do we do to balance both? I think that is where we
Yes,
are.
I think for so many Nigerians, the contention is that there is an essence to the creation of government. The government is there to look at issues, provide solutions, and solve problems, and not to have years of collective lip service that has been given to the issue of flooding over the years, especially in Nigeria. For example, like you made mention of Lado Dam for over 40 years. I think 40 years is too long for the Nigerian side of the Lado Dam not to have erected anything, even if there were small dams, to support the community farming and all the other irrigation purposes that man must keep going on with these activities, but government has to impose itself, and that's what uh, so many thinkings are heading towards.
Well, you see, whatever you're saying got to do with the kind of resources that are mobilized to meet up such action. I quite agree with you that government should be a continuity, but where government fails, that is now is the outcome we see. You don't belabor your past. You don't live in the past. You don't poison your future with the pain of the past. You know what you're supposed to do is you live from the past and now try to connect. And most seriously, if you browse presently, any information about flooding in Nigeria, what you'll find, I assure you now, 80% to 85% of that content is written by journalists, which is not verifiable. It is not quantitative. What I mean by not verifiable is you are giving reports. You are supposed to make the reports be backed by certain statistics that will have to give you something to do with, like, now inflow of water, the pool of the water, the damage and the quantity year in, year out. You'll find it extremely difficult to find that. There is nothing like quantitative research on aspect of this good enough to make even the government to sit on. Now, uh, the situation, you just spoke about counter dams. Counter dams is just one of the many things we can do, at least to do that. But they are not necessarily, the final thing you have to do. The other issues have to do with dredging. The other issues have to do with human activity, which should have to be guided, by sensitive hydrologists that should be commissioned to do something that should give us results, not just lamentation. So it is easier for us to say that things are bad with us over years, but we also fail to appreciate the fact that these are due to accumulation, of very previous huge activity of human whatever it is that is bringing these things to bear.
But sir, if you look at Adamawa State, for example, we have a governor that is proactive in solving the issue of flooding. Talking about Governor Ahmed Infantry, in some settlements in Adamawa State that have been suffering from flood disaster like Saminaka and that axis, we discovered that there are culverts that have been constructed. He made large waterways to ensure that the perennial flooding doesn't sweep away his people this time. Don't you think that is what governments are supposed to do? And then in response to that, you should try to help us give us an
I think
overview.
that is a very good example
Exactly, of proactiveness
proactive
of
governance.
government. So we shouldn't keep making excuses. So narrowing it down to Adamawa said there is a governor that is doing something to ensure that this recurring, regardless of the human activities. So in response to that, also help us give an overview of the work that has been done to ensure that flooding is mitigated in Adamawa State. So,
Thank God you guys started talking about flooding from a broader perspective. There's nothing the Adamawa State government alone can do about the water corridor of River Benue, for instance. Even if it takes the entirety of its resource allocation and even revenue generated, it cannot stop what the Benue can do. But like you said, in respect to certain tributaries that affect, maybe some rural settlements along the line where there's human activity and settlement, one of find that you can talk about. You can talk about local flood disaster issues, for instance, and you can talk about the quick interventions that government can do because that particular water line is light, it's not as heavy as that of the Benue. Well, that's commendable, if he's putting this effort to it. And we've also seen another effort of his, coming towards what is bedeviling some parts of Timbuktu. Is it Wuro Jabe?
yeah.
And maybe
Lebaru,
yeah, some of the Saminaka, and quite a number of those places. I think you give it to him. That one I can say is just basically, an urban interventionist scheme, not truly against what the real flood can do. For instance, if the Benue decide to disgorge, beyond expectations. All he can do is to continue to do the interventionist things that you can see. Save people from unsafe places. Provide relief for them for a while, and the shorter the area, they have their circle or relief, the sooner also they begin to go back to those places. So I think his intervention is coming in timely because it's a game of thought that is being put into his effort, given the kind of design and concern he's putting into, looking at the urban areas and the critical areas of flooding, if you look at them. Since Jan, who was a military person that did a lot, to open up Jamaica, and to reduce flooding with big gutters that you can see, taking charge of huge body of water that's relieving, what do you call this extension after the old market? The entirety of that place used to be a flood-prone area, even the state locals. But now the big gutters that he has created, in between the runabout and GG, has helped to divert, the water in good quantity, good enough to enable some flow into places like Chinko and off there. Now that's what Jan did, that you can see that there is no flooding in nearly one quarter, of the entirety of the Jamaica urban area. Now, what's the problem? Now, the city is enlarging or enlarged beyond capacity. And you notice that the frivolous allocation of land by Mayungwas and other district heads have also brought about problems of people building on waterways. And that's what you've seen, in the Jamaica-less city areas. And now that Fintry is coming and connecting what Jan did with big gutters and opening spaces, in that area, you're going to find some relief there. But that is not to tell you that he has, God's power, on his hands to stop it where it is affecting other, local government settlements, that maybe live on the borders or by the banks of the River Benue. You're talking of about 4 local governments: Fofore, Yola, Yola North, Yola South. Okay, that's 3. You're talking about Giri. You're talking about Densa. You're talking about Numan, and some aspects of Lamure. So about 7 local governments on the road. That one is a big one. So I think it's comprehensive enough for us to appreciate. Yes, he has started tackling the urban area, at least for it, to give some kind of safe space for people to exist, as a result of his own scheme.
So is there a plan
Yes.
to expand this during his administration, or what are we going to see?
Yeah, I think for every government, particularly that of Ahmad Fintri that you've seen,
Yeah.
where he has placed some kind of measure a little beyond what the federal government is doing,
Yes.
that also goes into expect that, as he's doing his own urban renewal, meeting up local governments in other places, particularly Numan, for instance. I know that he has a very big engagement plan, to look at issues of road construction in that particular local government. And they have to do, with kind consideration to waterways in and out that will allow him to construct routes at least to reach some of the hinter places. So I think good thinking, good product, they say,
Yes.
and good application and implementation, good expectation for the future. He has started something which is adding, value to the need to ensure that the issues of flooding are tackled, not only being interventionist. When something happens, you rush in, relief material. When something happens, you go, you fix your camera, you hear all kinds of complaints and protests by people that have been also part of the problem themselves. Now, you look at what he has done, the deliberate creation of huge gutters in Wuro Jabi area, if I'm not mistaken, connecting the FGGC. That place used to be, small water, small rainwater. You find the place flooding. I'm sure by now it's highly preparatory because the timing is good and the delivery of the project is also good because we are going to now see how that is going to be an intervention in the true sense of it.
Okay, sir. I think what still talking on Governor Amado Morifitri, that is what we've been asking from the beginning of this show, that this is an engineering solution. which means man is taking charge of his environment, trying to affect what affects him.
Yes.
So, I think so. That's what is we're trying to look at here. We went around these areas and we had interview with the residents, and it's not ready yet, but they are already impressed with with the design and the construction work. So, what general call will you make to the public in regards to these issues? So because you made mention that there are man-made influences that also contribute to the issue of flooding and general situation of waters being diverted into. So, what call will you make to people in regards to these new waterways that are being constructed, so that we can contribute positively to helping the government
Yes.
perform his job well?
Now you'll appreciate exactly what I'm talking about when I mention the issue of human activity. And humans around here, particularly those that migrate from rural areas into the urban areas, have little education and consideration for the need to control waste. And waste, once it blocks water passages, it becomes a problem. Now, even the gutters in Jamaica, you see how people just dump waste anyhow. And I assure you, if they don't take time and if they are not informed to do the best by reducing the human activity, doing with blockage of waterways, we're coming back to the same thing, because if they block them with all the nonsense, the filth and the whatnot, and even farming activity, somebody will not mind to go and take mud that is not useful in his house into, a gutter, for instance. By the time you do that, that's a deliberate activity. So it's a call and an appeal for the people, to look at what it takes, to sanitize and to maintain the sanctity, of those drainages as they are open. Now, looking at this at micro level, that takes us to what you're talking about, the need for governments to bring out a robust thing to do with how to maintain, marshes, how to maintain ponds, how to maintain the counter dams that you're talking about, and how not to get them, be a problem to us. So essentially, it's a call that the government at perhaps the highest level should be much more strategic, in bringing out comprehensive plans to ensure that they deploy, what it takes, to take charge of riverbanks, to take charge of siltation, by desilting, and doing other activity that will make people to know that if you farm on this place and you are draining water from the main source of it, you are also increasing the possibility of that place being blocked, by mud. And then you give them good education as to how to maintain it. So I think the populace will have to be very, very attentive, and there must also be very comprehensive and engaging, constructive ways, by the journalists, those that inform and educate and enlighten, good enough to know what to tell the people, so that we can have ample and quantitative data good enough to get the people to have the right knowledge.
That is Professor John Gamsa talking on managing flood and disasters. We'll be going out for a very short break, and when we'll come back, we'll round up this very particular section of talking about flood in Nigeria.
Alhamdulillah, gaskiya muna fuskantar matsaloli game da in aka yi ruwan sama, ba ma kamar irina. Idan an yi ruwan sama bana gida, ina tunanin me zai faru da gidana da iyalina kuma da almajiraina. Sannan ko da ina cikin Jimeta aka yi ruwa, dawowa sami na kai kaman wahala, sai na jira kamar 30 awa kenan haka, awa 1 da rabi kafin nan ruwa ya wuce. Haka za mu ta shan wahala dai. Muna zuwa rana ɗaya na yi tafiya na dawo, na samu motoci an kawo su, na ce to nan ko me ke faru? Aka ce ai gwamna ne mai girma, gwamna zai mana hanya. To da ikon Allah kuma gashi mun zo mun samu hanya, muna tunanin kuma wannan matsalar insha Allah ta wuce, sai dai tarihi. Wannan babban mahimmanci ne, saboda idan ba ma a nan kadai ba, har yamma da wal kwamtin nan, waccan hanya jar ƙasa, ita ruwa na fitowa daga Sangere, yana kuma fitowa daga Dunga, yana tahowa na kama anguwanni. To amma da ikon Allah da kuma taimakon gwamna mai girma, yanzu insha Allah duka wannan matsalan babu. mu abin da za mu ce mu gwamna mai girma ubangiji Allah saka mashi da alkhairi, Allah sa kuma ya ga mulkin shi lafiya, wanda kuma zai biyo bayan shi Allah sa irin ayyukan da ya kira tun daga ciyaman har ya zuwa sauran masu mukamai har ya zuwa gwamna, dukkan wanda Allah ya bashi iko da zarafi har ya samu Allah ya kawo shi irin wannan ya ɗora mashi nauyin jama'a, to da Allah ya kokari ya irka yin abin da wannan mai girma gwamna Fintiri ya yi, irin wannan halaye masu kyau, saboda mu dai muna addu'a a gare shi dukkan wanda zai zo ubangiji Allah sai mana irin wannan halayen abin da ya, saboda so tari za a zo a fara aiki sai a bari, sai a yi toye daren mutane zan maku kaza zan maku kaza, to wannan shi in ya fara baya bari sai ya kara ki.
Damina ya zo anguwan nan kam sai dai godiya, don abun da muke gani a nan sai dai Allah. Ruwa kowa ya gani nan wurin, idan damina ya zo ruwa ya zo har kirji, ba kowa zai iya tsallakewa ba, amma da yardan Allah da ikon Allah kuma Allah ya yardan mana, yanzu ka gani abun da gwamna ya zo ya yi mana. Kaga yanzu dai a takaice duk wanda ya zo nan ya san matsalar mu kan Allah ya da ta kau, kuma kaga cikin samuna kan nan kaga lambatu da aka yi da waye duka, yanzu dai muna fata a yanzu kam da yardan Allah za mu shiga cikin anguwan nan mu kwanta hankalin mu kwance ba wani abu, kuma muna roƙo gwamnan nan ya yi mana abun da wallahi ba mu taɓa tsammani ba. Don menene? Don yanzu kaga nan an yi gwamnoni da yawa ba wanda ya mana wannan wallahi, dole mu yi alfahari da shi, kuma muna roƙo hanyar nan gashi dai an mana iya da inda wahalan yake, amma wahalan da saura a ciki kaɗan. Muna roƙo har yanzu gwamna ya sake duba mana gaba, duka mutanensa duka nashi ne, duka duk wani wanda ka sani nashi ne, ba wannan ne wannan nashi wannan ba nashi ba. Kuma muna roƙo har yanzu tunda mun samu wannan din, in akwai waɗansu ma wanda suke da ciki irin wannan damuwan, to muna roƙo su ma a duba musu kaɗan, wani ma in ya zo ya sake jona shine ci gaba ai, amma ba wai wannan ya zo ya yi nashi, wannan in ya zo shi kuma ya bar wannan din shi ma ya duba wani daban, kaga ba za a ci gaba ba. Shine duk inda kaga an ci gaba a game da siyasa, to wannan ya dora akan wannan, wannan ya dora akan wannan, amma ba wannan ba ci gaba. Wannan ya yi nashi, wannan ya zo ya rusa shi ma yace zai yi, kaga ana gidan jiya har yanzu. To abin da ya sa ka duba jihohi da yawa Adamawa mu yanda ta zama, wanda yanzu wannan da ya zo kaga ya dan hudda mu ai, kuma muna alfahari da cewa muna da flyover, muna da waye yanda muke zuwa, muna duk Najeriya ba inda ban zaga ba, duk Najeriya ba jihar da ban je ba, ni direba ne. Yawa saboda haka muna roƙo wannan abun da aka yi mana ƙara mana gaba, kaga an ce so ne amma son kai yafi, to shi yasa muke roƙo, muna roƙo dai dan sauran a dan ƙarasa mana gaba. Ba za gaji ba ai, ba za gaji ba.
Da alama da aikin Fintiri ya burge.
A'a ni ka wallahi tallahi ya burge ni, wallahi tallahi ya burge ni, ka san ba duk abun da za ka yi ka faɗi tsakaninka da Allah. Ni har ga Allah ne ban zaɓi Fintiri ba, wallahi ban zaɓe shi ba, amma mai gidanmu ne, dama shi ma dan mai ne, ka gane ka, ni direban tankin mai ne, amma kaga yanzu ya bar gefen mai ya dawo siyasa, gashi kuma mun samu ci gaba, wallahi har ga Allah ban zaɓe shi ba, ni APC na zaɓa, amma nan gaba kam ba magana APC, za mu aiki ake nema ai, me ake nema, ko kuma wanda kake tsammani kan ga wanda ya a zahiri, dole ka bi wanda kake so. Nan tukuna su ba wai fa za a gaya musu ba, sun gani da idonsu ne abin da ya kamata, ko ba haka ba? Kaga ruwa ya zo, wallahi da yawa a nan inda mana ya zo an ga hadiri yana zuwa, wallahi ba mai yin bacci, to kana kwance zaka ji ruwa ya shigo ba sallama, ba komai ya shigo, amma yanzu da yardan Allah yanzu kam lafiya kalau. Kuma ina roƙo, ina kira ga mutanen anguwa, ba fa sai an zo an musu ƙarya ba, yanzu kan sun gani da idonsu ne, sun ga abin da ya kamata, sun ga kuma waye ya kamata su bi, don mai ci gaba shi za bi. Kaga kamar lalube cikin duhu ne, kana lalube kana tsammani wani in yazo zai mana abu kaza, to wani bai zo ba, ga wanda ya zo ya kamata kai sai ka tsaye hannunka ɗaya kawai, shine. To ina roƙo kuma ina kira ga mutanenmu wanda suke area nan gaba ɗaya, idan lokacin zaɓe ma ya zo ba wani bambanci, a bilayi kawai, a bilayi ba wani maganan wani a zaɓi wannan a zaɓi ga wanda ya yi kawai a bi shi ai kawai ya cimma burinsa da yake nema. Saboda haka muna roƙo don Allah don annabi kuma har yanzu ku 'yan jarida ku isar da mana da sako, don mu kan kaga ba mu mu isar da sako ba, ku ne masu idar da sakon nan. Saboda haka ni kanin mai anguwa jajere ne, ni kaninsa ne, to muna roƙo don Allah a ɗan sake duba mana dai kada gaji, abubuwan yana da yawa kam, wannan yana so wannan yana so wannan yana so wannan, amma a duba muhimmanci wanda ya fi muhimmanci sai a yi, wani ma in ya zo shi ma ya ƙara gaba.
We face a lot of challenges in our area. During the rainy season, we face flood. Sometimes it destroys houses, sometimes farmland. Okay. It will make a lot of difference because now we are free. We know that we are not going to face any flood again. Seriously, we thank the government about what he has done.
Come back. If you're just joining us, this is the talking point where on this edition of the show we were talking about the issue of flooding and how it affects the citizens, the monies that have been spent, and yet no permanent solution has been provided to ensure that the problem is put to bed completely. And then recently there has been an issue that has been trending, regarding the Labour Party and the restructuring. And then bringing it home in Adamawa State, the 18 local government chairmen voted out their chairman in the person of Mr. Nicholas Christopher on the issue of anti-party activities and some other things that they leveled against him. Mr. Billy, maybe you help me explain to our audience why that has been done since 2022. Why did they take this long before passing a vote of no confidence on their chairman? Do you think it's a step forward, looking at the Labour Party is doing a general restructuring right now?
I think it's normal in political party activities that there will be shaking, there will be changes, there will be jostling for positions, there will be this kind of wrangling. I think but for 18 local government chairmen of the party to come together and pass a vote of no confidence on the person, if I were that very particular person, I would accept it in good faith and enter into a creative negotiation. I was still irrelevant.
Did he receive?
Yes, of course. They called for another press briefing, and were saying that the vote was invalid.
Invalid, and then the chairman were not registered members of the party. This kind of wrangling.
Yeah, but I think just like Billy just raised the issue, it's normal wrangles in politics. To jostle for space and interest. But the manner it is done, if you are living your democracy not sanitized, you always expect that kind of a thing to happen. So unfortunately, the Nigerian system is just exhibiting its own culture, where maybe a few people can connive against one person, even if the person is righteous. So I believe that his own interest, to kind of express his own right and what he has done, either wrong or right, is also part of democracy. So one will look at it, if it is done in goodwill, if it is done with good intention, if it is going to help the Labour Party to grow, that is their own cup of tea. But for the opposition that would like to feed on their own wrangles, it's also a kudos and something that is respected. So it's part of politics. So to me, let them sanitize themselves. Perhaps in the process, we're going to get a very good leadership selection process because the party chairmen are the ones that take charge and control of determining who comes up, to either be a good candidate or not. So if that is good for them, they're trying to sanitize themselves. We can also be sure that maybe they will come and help us do the right thing and have a better democracy through leadership selection process that is good.
And I think still on the issue of the Labour Party, since the last election, the 2020 general elections, Labour Party gave a good running at the national level. So I think it is dawning on the party that if it does not organize and reorganize, there is no future for the party.
Exactly.
Recently some members, about 7 members of the State Assembly of the party, defected to PDP, I think. So, and I think that is not a good progress from 2023 election
No, it's not.
for them. So I think if this is the way to go, it is very, very important that they go into it. But I think they should do it with respect for each other and not destroy the party in the process of this thing. So,
You know, personally, I'm not holding brief for them. If I am of the PDP, and I think it's nice for me to throw or to send my cat into the pigeons, and if they scatter, and I can get money, that makes it a lot easier. So I think it's a game of politics, but most importantly, let's look at it from the part of equity, natural justice, and fairness that is perhaps demanded for us to have very credible structures that will help us to come out with credible leaders. So I think looking at it from that perspective, if the shakings are good, they're good. Let's see how it goes.
All right.
Thank you.
So far, we're keeping our fingers crossed.
Thank you, sir. All right, so I think that's all we have on this episode of Talking Point. If you are out there listening to us, watching us on your mobile devices, log on to our website, drop your comment. What do you think about the issue of this flooding in Nigeria? Every year, flood keep happening. We keep picking the pieces of our lives as a result of the devastation. Are we just going to be forever victims to the flooding that we are supposed to control, or when are we going to wake up to become masters of our environment? And that's all we have for you as far as this episode is concerned. With me in the studio is my colleague and usual talkative.
Yeah, thank you for being with us, and I love that compliment.
From a partner talkative.
The partner talkative. Thank you very much, Doctor, for being with us, and thank you our audience for being a part of this exciting show, which affects every one of us. Talking about the issue of the flooding. Remember, this is the heat season, so ensure you stay hydrated, drink water, and except if it's necessary, do not engage in strenuous activities under the sun between the peak period of 12 p.m. and 4 p.m. We love you, and until we come again your way with an excellent edition of the Talking Point, I remain Letafida Suleiman.
And I'm Billy Graham Abel, as usual. But in Yola, even the night, it's still hot.
It's so hot.
Yes, sir.
I have nothing to say about that. Just learn to endure and be safe, like your partner talkative. So I'm happy to be amidst two parrots.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So much.